You're listening to the What's Happening podcast with Gary Watts.
Good morning. I'm here with Rod Lehnertz, Senior Vice President, University of Iowa, Director of Operations and Finance, and also the University of Iowa's architect. Rod, good morning.
Good morning. How are you, Gary?
So it is great, actually. It's a beautiful day. Let's start out with your family. Tell us about your lovely wife, Blanca. You have 3 children.
Sure.
Tell us some things about them that people may not know.
Yeah, so there's probably more to tell about them than about me, but I was born and raised in Iowa City,
Right.
And to pursue architecture as my course of study, I had to leave the University of Iowa. I started here and was actually a manager on George Raveling's first basketball teams, but had to leave to pursue architecture, and that's where, as I say, I pursued a swimmer. So my wife was swimming at the University of Kansas. She grew up in San Francisco, and that was where we met. And we eventually, after graduation, moved to Southern California, but came back here when it was a time to have our first child, Anthony. We have 3 kids. All 3 of them, well, 2 of them are through the University of Iowa, and one of them is a current student. Our youngest, Mariana, is a student at the University of Iowa. Our middle daughter, Teresa, was a student athlete following in her mom's footsteps. She was a Hawkeye swimmer. And they represent the 5th generation of Iowa Hawkeyes for our family dating back to World War I. So our roots are deep with the University of Iowa, and we're proud, and I'm certainly proud to be part of the university now in my 30th year with Iowa.
Amazing. Tell us about architecture. What interests you as maybe a student in high school? What was interests you about architecture?
You know, it wasn't actually high school. As I mentioned, I was a manager for the basketball team. To
Right.
date me, that was 1983, and we had just opened Carver Hawkeye Arena. It was the first National Design Award-winning building on the University of Iowa campus. And as the only manager on the basketball team from Iowa City and around here all year, I was asked if I would be the first tour guide of Carver Hawkeye Arena. A lot of people wanted to tour the building. And it was that experience, visiting with people, talking about the architecture, learning about it, that made me realize that architecture is what I wanted to pursue. So ironically, it was my job as a student at the University of Iowa that moved me to leave Iowa for a while and pursue architecture.
Well, thinking about Carver Hawkeye, I mean, it's 360 degrees, unobstructed views. You can see from anything. You don't have I remember the old field house, you're always looking at the columns. You'd
Yeah,
sit
so
up there
do
looking
I.
at columns. So architecturally, I can see where it is an interesting
Yeah, and it
building.
was a building that was green before buildings were green. It was built into the ravine. As you'd pass by it, you'd have
Right.
no idea that the building hosts 15,500 fans because most of it is down into the ravine. That also allows us to have a full arena of 15,000 and more fans with no air conditioning. Now,
Right.
come graduation time, that's not very convenient
True.
because we do 3 or 4 graduations, and by the last one, it's nice and hot. But and we're going to be doing some modernizations. The athletic department's going to advance some modernizations of Carver Hawkeye Arena. But you're exactly right; it continues to be an iconic building and a great piece of architecture on our campus and for the athletic department. And we're adding to it with the new wrestling center. The Goschke family as the lead donors on a $30 million project funded solely by donations to the University of Iowa. And we're in the last year of construction for that exciting project. It'll be based on the site. It'll be the final addition to Carver Hawkeye Arena. A new tunnel has already been completed, so there'll be a second tunnel to the floor for the wrestling team. And maybe an easier way out after events for visitors who may be down at the floor.
You mentioned George Raveling. Didn't he have something to do with the Nike contract with Michael Jordan? I was watching that show.
That movie has come out.
Yeah.
He's actually featured in the movie.
Yeah.
You know, what's interesting is he was a wonderful person to learn from when I was a student here. And I still have in my possession in my basement a postcard from him. In 1984, he was an assistant coach to Bobby Knight for the Olympic team. And he sent a postcard from their practices and said in it, great experience, a wonderful experience as a coach for this team. And then he added, and I've been watching this Michael Jordan guy, and he is something. He's going to be an amazing NBA basketball player. And that was before most of us really knew a lot about Jordan. He was great. But Dean Smith made sure they didn't have any individual stars, so he wasn't even their leading scorer. But George Raveling could tell this was the guy, and he even sent me a postcard, a student. That tells you how much he cared about the people he worked with. But yeah, he saw it just ahead of all that Nike stuff.
And all the sports at Iowa are fabulous, but we got to mention Caitlin Clark and that women's basketball team.
Yeah,
how
remarkable.
Amazing. It didn't sell out in like a half a day.
Oh yeah, it is an absolutely amazing shift for the entire sport, and we're proud of Caitlin and of the all of the Hawkeye women's basketball team, and of course Lisa and Jan and the team, and we're expanding it to a bigger issue. What is it? October? Is it 15th, 13th? We will be hosting a basketball game on the floor at Kinnick Stadium at Duke Slater Field in Kinnick Stadium. And I can only imagine, we did this once for wrestling, and the grapple and the gridiron, and this time it's the big crossover event. So Caitlin and the team will be on the floor at Kinnick Stadium, waving to the kids in the Stead Family Children's Hospital. It'll be a great event. We look forward to everybody being there.
What do they anticipate for the crowd? Do you know?
Well, there's no telling, but I know they're shooting for 50,000 or more.
Wow.
And yeah, it will be nearly sold out.
Speaking of Kinnick, what's better than the wave in the first quarter in football games, where both teams, all the players and all the fans turn around to the Stead Family Pavilion and wave at the Children's Hospital? I've never seen it. It's the best thing in athletics.
There's some things you never intend to end up being an iconic marker for you on a national basis, but it has become that. And we didn't predict it, and we didn't create it. It was a grade school teacher who came up with the idea. Really? And since 2017, it's been one of the really true special events at the University of Iowa, but in all of college athletics. And it transcends the sport. It tells us all what is, and Coach Ferentz has said it, what is really important, who the real heroes are. And for those who experience it, it's more and more tear-jerking every time it happens. And people make trips to Iowa City that would have never made trips to Iowa City just to experience that wave. And we're very proud of it, and it is a very special and emotional part of our campus. And
then we start out with the kids captain in every game too. That's amazing. So, especially with the hospital right there and what they do for people. Yeah,
absolutely. And we'll have a kids captain for that women's game, the women's basketball game as well. Christy is going to be one of those kids captains for us. We're proud of every one of them. It's been more than 10 years of kids captains at Kinnick Stadium, and again, another part of what makes Iowa and the University of Iowa a special place.
I think the women's athletics is just so fantastic. I saw something the other day where I guess the University of Nebraska had a volleyball game in their stadium, and I think there was 92,000 folks that watched that. And so it's so neat to see Iowa and Kinnick with the ladies basketball team. It's great.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's talk about the University of Iowa. Let's talk about how great Iowa City is with the University of Iowa. What would Iowa City be without the University of Iowa?
What would the university be without Iowa City? I mean, we are mutual, symbiotic to a point where I've seen many campuses around the country as in my role as an administrator, my role as a university architect, and have visited with all of our peer institutions, but many others. And I have never seen a university that has a better town and gown relationship than we have with the cities who host us. When we say Iowa City, Coralville, University Heights, our relationships with the leadership and the citizens of these communities are unlike any I've ever seen. And part of that is the setting we have. We have the very core of our campus, the Pentecrest, is directly across the street from the very core of Iowa City. And in fact, downtown Iowa City and the pedestrian mall are part of our campus to our students. They stop into a coffee shop between classes. And most places you have to travel to get to the downtown from the university, not here. And we have issues. Every institution and community has issues, but I know no place that partners more on a daily basis than we do with Iowa City, Coralville, and University Heights.
Yeah, the campus is enthralled within the city. So
absolutely.
I mean, just a lot going on there with everybody. Tell us a little bit about, in 2008, talk about the floods and what your involvement was in rebuilding and design engineering and raising things out of the floodplain. Just can you go through a little bit of that floodplain, because that's an amazing story.
Yeah, I don't know how much time you have. It deserves a lot of time. It's a remarkable story of perseverance, not just for the university, but for our community and Eastern Iowa, because of course Cedar Rapids was hit just as heavily as with the Cedar River as was Iowa City and Coralville with the Iowa River. But that summer, that spring was a harrowing time for everyone who was here. It ended up occupying, for me and many others, occupying the better part of a decade of our career in first trying to survive the flood and keep the campus functioning. We lost 22 major buildings to the flood. It was a $750 million disaster. We are still the largest individual owner customer in FEMA history. And how we did it, and how we did it with all kinds of partners from our state and federal legislators and leaders, the local leaders, the construction community. We didn't have enough contractors to do what we did that year. We were doing, just in recovery from the flood, we were doing more construction than the city of Minneapolis. And in this community size, we shouldn't have pulled it off, but we did because we are Iowans, we're Iowa Cityans, and we helped each other enough to make it work. For me, initially I thought, well, as university architect, we're going to see this flood thing happen, and then we're going to go in and repair things. Ended up very different than that. All of us took different jobs than we had signed up for during the days of the flood, coordinating volunteers. We had thousands of volunteers on campus, didn't ask for one, and yet thousands showed up morning, noon, and night. We had to be there for them, with them, getting them supplies, those kinds of things. And then working with the community, having CNN and the Weather Channel and all the major networks here all at once, we were suddenly taking care of media when we didn't know we would, and when we probably shouldn't have been. We should have been working on things. But then, as President Mason said in the midst of it, on June 15th, the crest of the flood in 2008, she said, "We will reopen this university in 10 days." Well, many of us took a gasp, but we knew she had to, because if we hadn't opened or reopened in 10 days, we would have lost the summer session. And there are thousands of students that rely on the summer session. It would have changed the trajectory of our campus forever. So whether we should have been able to pull that off or not, we had to. And so it was a massive cleanup effort. We had 24-hour shifts rebuilding temporary boilers so that we could have some supply of chilled air, of steam to the buildings, those kinds of things. But a mad dash till the fall, when we welcomed the largest class in the history of our campus that fall. We had to rebuild a power plant before November 1st, when the heating season would start. We'd have to shut the campus down at that point if we didn't have the power plant rebuilt. And then 8 years of recovery. And frankly, 8 years of formal recovery, and then one non-federally funded project, which just finished this last year to kind of cap all of them off, which is the Stanley Museum of Art. We lost our museum, or couldn't move the art back into our original museum. So without any federal help, we designed and built a building with BNIM Architects in Des Moines, Rod Cruzy's team. And that project was, over 50% of that project was private donations, to be able to do a remarkable museum. If people have not been there, they need to go there. It has gotten an incredible outpouring of visitors in its first year. The painting by Jackson Pollock, the mural, is back in its place on campus after a worldwide tour, and a tour that included the Los Angeles Times claiming it's the most important piece of modern art in the entire world. Wow. And it's ours, and it's in our wonderful museum. So that really capped off the 2008 flood recovery, some 13, 14 years after the flood happened to us. But we are a better campus for it. We're a model nationally for protection and recovery from floods. Our Iowa Flood Center, through the Hydraulics Institute and our College of Engineering, is considered one of the top in the nation, if not the world. And we're experts to help others learn from what we survived.
The art building is amazing. I love the brick.
Yeah,
the way they
beautiful.
designed the angles of the brick when you drive by. What is that? Well, it's actually brick. And it's
Yeah,
really,
it was a unique design by Cruzy and his team to take what is considered a high iron content black brick that on its own could look relatively
right.
monochromatic and mundane, but the way they patterned it and undulated the exterior face and then included this high iron where the sun, as you're driving by, say on Burlington, when the sun reflects off of it, it takes on different hues and colors and sort of expresses itself as you drive by. Very actually exciting design, but inside a building that doesn't try to steal the attention away from the art, and it shouldn't. And many museums do. This one, the art is the star, and our great director Lauren Lessing and her team have plans. For instance, every third grader in the state of Iowa will go through this museum.
Good.
We intend for it's completely free of charge. We have programming that keep it vibrant all the time. In fact, we had mentioned before the show about Dick Gibson, who was my first mentor at the University of Iowa as an administrator and a planner. The park that sits right outside of the museum is Gibson Square, named after Dick Gibson, and that has now become a sculpture garden that is the front door to the Stanley Museum of Art.
Yeah, it's amazing. Another thing, it's free.
Absolutely.
You walk in, and if you haven't been in it, you got to go in.
Oh, you really do.
And
It's fabulous.
everybody in Iowa should go through it.
They should.
It is. Any other buildings that were created out of the flood? I mean, you got the art. What other things? Can you tell us about?
With the 22 buildings, we worked with FEMA and the federal government in repairing and protecting the vast majority of the buildings in different ways, and each one of them their own story. But 2 buildings were lost to the flood. One of those was the original art building, the 1936 art building, which had been a very important building on our campus, very important presence on the Iowa River. It brought Grant Wood to our campus. That's where Grant Wood taught and worked. But it had been added on to over the decades and sort of marginalized its great original architecture. Well, FEMA recognized the building had been damaged to the point of replacement, but also recognized the original 1936 building was so historic that they mandated we keep the 1936 building, remove all of the additions that have been put on it, and then we mothballed the building. It's currently mothballed now for 15 years, and we are programming and will be programming in this 10-year master plan we have to bring that building back to life and protect it appropriately. But it did allow us to work with the federal government to replace its program, which is the Stephen Hull designed, the silver building you see right across the street from it. It's a visual arts building, sits next to Stephen Hull's original building on our campus from a decade earlier, Art Building West. So 2 world-renowned pieces of architecture that sit right next to each other representing our visual arts program. There are no programs in the country that have the facilities we have for the visual arts now. Stephen Hull's first building, the one that peers over the pond in the Corten steel, was judged by the Royal Institute of British Architects as one of the top 8 building designs in the world. Wow. And that's stuff that the University of Iowa has been known for years and years. So that was one. And then the other was a gigantic 300,000 square foot complex that was the original Hancher Auditorium and the Voxman Music Building. They were combined when it was built in 1972. The building was designed by Max Abramovitz, part of this first wave of big internationally recognized architects who came to our campus. And that building was flooded to the point of replacement. The water was 1.5 feet above the stage up to row O in the seating bowl. And then you have the orchestra pit and the mechanical units below, about 35 feet of standing water in that building when the flood occurred. FEMA recognized it needed to be replaced, and we didn't have a site that allowed for us to put 300,000 square feet on a dry, safe site that students could get to. And so they allowed us in our negotiations with them, and I went on many negotiations with the federal government during those periods of time. I was assigned to be primarily the person working with them. They allowed us to build 2 buildings and replace the programs independently. So our beautiful Hancher Auditorium, designed by Caesar Pelli, opened in 2017, sits as really sort of a a lion at the doorstep of the University of Iowa Gateway feature, remarkable building. And then the Voxman Music Building right downtown at Burlington and Clinton Street. The music program in our College of Liberal Arts and Sciences and that building host about 400 performances a year, almost all of them free. And it used to be down on the arts campus, and now it's right in the middle of downtown Iowa City. So it's transformational not only for the School of Music and the university, but for the entire downtown.
And you think about the city, how it worked with the University of Iowa, raised Dubuque Street,
yes,
raised
absolutely.
Park Avenue Bridge.
Yep, absolutely.
And without that, where would Hampshire be?
Yeah, Hampshire and Mayflower and all of the access to Iowa City. It was a messy few years when that was going on, but we're far better for it.
Yeah, it's amazing. Let's talk a little bit about, you got a lot of new buildings coming up.
Sure.
And I see a building coming out of the ground at Forever Green in North Liberty, the University of Iowa.
Absolutely, yeah.
Orthopedic clinics or what. Can you tell us about, we can maybe go through some slides too whenever you want, but
yeah,
I'm just always excited to see all the new buildings in the University of Iowa. So
one of the things we had an opportunity to do in January 2022, the Board of Regents worked with us to, and we have a great, and it's so important that we do have a great relationship with the Board of Regents. Our President Wilson has worked tirelessly in extending and advancing and improving relationships with the Board of Regents, with our state legislature, and these make big differences to us as in the daily operations of our university. And in this case, the board had us present to them in January 2022 a 10-year master plan. Typically before that, we were going sort of project by project to give them explanations for what we need to do next. Now, it was great that we had the opportunity to do that. We're operating now from that. But one of the challenges is when you communicate an anticipated or aimed at 10 years of development, it looks like we're doing an enormous amount of work. We are to some degree, but it actually over a 10-year period is less than we've been doing in the previous 10 years. A lot of our master plan is about right-sizing the main campus. We are the great keepers of history, both for the university, for the community, for the state, but there are also those moments we have to look at retaining buildings that are obsolete, operationally, functionally. We have to remain modern for our faculty, our researchers, our students, our patients. And so there are times when we look at the long-term viability of buildings. Seashore Hall was an example of that. Built in 1899 as our first hospital. It was wood-framed. We had already closed down parts of the building because of termite damage over the decades. And the time came for that building to not be on the campus anymore. We preserve history left and right, but there are times when we do replace buildings. And in the last 5 years, we have removed about 200,000 square feet of space from our campus as we've effectively planned the campus in a more efficient way. That saves a lot of future funding dollars in care for these buildings. We have 263 buildings on our campus. The average age of our buildings is 49 years. We have nearly 20 buildings more than 100 years, and it's not simple or inexpensive to take care of those buildings. And so we take that responsibility heavily. The 10-year master plan has as much about those kinds of efforts as new buildings. But when we look at the 10-year master plan, different than would have been the case 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, a majority of the work that we are doing is related to healthcare and the care of the citizens of the state of Iowa. Our hospital complex, which is the most densely populated square mile in the state of Iowa, is occupied to nearly 100% of the time. And this is not a sustainable model in healthcare. By models, it shouldn't be more than 80 to 85% for efficient operation. We have been forced to, though we're the only tertiary quaternary serious business hospital, I mean, the most serious cases in the state, we have to turn away more than 2,000 transfer patients a year because we don't have room for them. So that's where a lot of our thrust is aimed at in that 10-year master plan. And it starts with, as you said, and we do have an image of it, but it starts with the North Liberty project at Forever Green. The project is going wonderfully. It's over 50% complete. We're actually seeing negative change orders in the project, which is fairly unusual. Wow. It's ahead of schedule. We look forward to giving the Board of Regents a tour of the building when they're in town at the end of this month. Very proud of it. It will be anchored by programs related to orthopedics, but it'll have a fully functioning emergency room. It will have hospital beds, operatories. So a really important reach to the community from that perspective. And then it also enables, that project should be complete in 2025. A lot of the work we are doing on campus is aiming at that important year, because in 2025, we intend at the end of that year to advance construction on a new patient tower that will be on the main hospital complex. You see the Stead Family Children's Hospital. This would be a north version of that, to the north of that will be even taller. It's all based on FAA height regulations, but it will expand our ability to host patients on campus and also extend our priorities to move away from 2-bed rooms. We have a lot of the rooms in the main hospital complex are 2 patients to a room, and that's not by current standard or our preference for care of the patients that come. This will allow us to begin to modernize other parts of the hospital to get to all single bedrooms over time. No project of that scale can happen without a lot of enabling projects. And that's some of what we're doing now. So 3 major enabling projects to do that tower that we're talking about. One of them is a new academic building. It'll be right across the street from the field house on what we call parking lot 14, but facing Melrose. It's the Health Science Academic Building. It will take 3 noted and nationally ranked health science programs, both in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences and in the Carver College of Medicine, and combine them into one building, allowing us to right-size the campus with other areas of outdated buildings, but also get out of the way. Our Wendell Johnson Speech and Hearing Building, top-ranked program, is on the footprint of that future tower that we're going to build for the hospital. That tower has garnered, by the way, the largest gift in the history of the university, a $70 million gift by the Richard O. Jacobson Foundation. Another project that is happening because of our getting ready for that project is a new parking ramp north of Kinnick Stadium. So it'd be a roughly 950 space parking ramp. The old hospital ramp 1 is on the footprint of the future tower. It's also a very old and aging parking ramp. So a larger version will go north of Kinnick Stadium. We're under construction with that right now. And then projects that don't seem big but are, the water tower that sort of hovers outside of Kinnick Stadium is actually on the grounds of the hospital and at that footprint for the new tower. So we are in the design process currently of relocating the water tower. It is grandfathered from its time on this campus in the 1950s at 1 million gallons of water storage. When it's replaced, it's required to host 2 million gallons. And in fact, we have to update the water storage on the other side of the river, on the east side of the river, as a part of that change. So no small project, and takes a lot of coordination, road work, utility work, other things in that area, just to make ourselves ready for that big tower project. So that's a lot of what we have.
Is it another water tower? I mean, you move that one? Or?
Yeah, so we're going to move the water tower. We're going to build a new water tower that will contain twice as much water, 2 million gallons. Our site for that project is not under construction yet, but it's being designed, and the site will be just south of Carver Hawkeye Arena. There's a parking lot between it and the practice facilities for football, and it's at the southwest corner of that lot is where we will position the new tower. Be very visible, still have a little marketing on it, I would think, or branding on it when we go, but it will be an important modernization and make that site ready for a big patient tower project at the end of 2025.
Who's the architect at North Liberty on the project on Forever Green, the hospital?
Yeah, we have, it's let me think. It gets so many of these. I believe that one's Newman Munson.
Newman in town here.
Yeah. Newman Munson and I mentioned BNIM, OPN. We have a lot of great partners on the architectural front. And they have, over the year, been great partners, not only in designing the projects that we have on campus, but partnering with these world famous architects when we bring them to campus, which is no small feat. We are a walking history book of modern architecture and notable architects on this campus, and those don't happen without great partners, contractors and consultants.
I read something about the architect on Hancher. He was so excited when he saw the project that he had so much space, so much land, because I think he did a lot of things in Manhattan, New York City, Connecticut, wherever.
Right.
And he was just so excited at what he could do because he has so much land.
At Hancher, Caesar Pelli was a remarkable, famous, but had low ego and a great humanity about him in doing that project. And worked with OPN Architects. We always have an Iowa architect of record for all of our projects, no matter how we design it or who does the majority of the design work. And Iowan is always with us first.
I know at USC they have an architectural design of the whole campus. I think it's kind of a historic brick and maybe a Roman. I don't know what you call the architecture there, but what's your thought or your theme at Iowa if you had to put a name on it, or when you look at architecture, how do you think about the architecture, how it fits in with the history and everything at the University of Iowa?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'll have to say, I give a lot of tours of our campus, and every once in a while I'll get one of these tours. So who's the schizophrenic who came up with this design? There are those campuses, UCLA, Colorado, Notre Dame, that have different styles of architecture, but the same throughout their campus, from the details on of the roofs to the style of architecture, the style of brick or stone used. We have been a university. The short word or phrase to this is our architecture represents our university and our community and its creativity. We have been an artful university. It's a difference maker to the University of Iowa since our beginning. And whether it be the writer's workshop and the development of that in the 30s, too, as I mentioned earlier with our art building, we invented in 1936 with that building what was referred to as the Iowa idea. And we were the first university in the country to take the visual arts, sculpture, painting, drawing, and printmaking, and the written arts and history, and bring them together with one faculty, one building. That became known as the Iowa idea, and no art and art history program in the entire country doesn't have the Iowa idea as part of their history. So we have been about the arts. It's been our theme from our beginning. But in the mid-1960s, the director of our arts program, Frank Seiberling, and our president, Bowen, got together and said, we need to display this physically on our campus. Went to the Board of Regents and convinced the Board of Regents that we should be allowed to do this and go beyond the borders of the state of Iowa to find the world's most renowned architects so we can have the display of iconic and creative architecture on our campus that matches who we are as a university and a community. So in 1969, that was granted to us. Our university architect, who was arguably the first university architect in the country, George Horner, who was the university architect from 1930 to 1975, a remarkable career. He took a classmate of his, a friend of his from Illinois, which is where he graduated in 1928, and invited Max Abramovitz, who had just done the United Nations building, Avery Fisher Hall in New York City. He was the biggest name in architecture at that time in the late 60s, brought him to the University of Iowa for the very first project, which was the Museum of Art. And then from there, Max Abramovitz also designed the Hancher Auditorium we all grew to love, built in 1972. That started our story of internationally recognized architects, not on every project, but on the projects where we want to display that iconic creativity. But it should be noted that the campus started on the Pentecrest, the grounds of the first we were the capital city, And the old Capitol, as we refer to it, that entire area called the Pentacrest used to be the Capitol grounds. And that part of our campus was developed in recognition of and actually copying the 1893 World's Fair in Chicago, the Columbian Exposition, very renowned World's Fair that occurred. The greatest architects in America came together to do that project called the Great White City. Larger-than-life Beaux-Arts limestone architecture was the idea. And one of the architects, Henry Van Brunt, from that team visited, he was from Kansas City, was returning to Kansas City after the fair in 1893, visited our President Schaefer and said, you need to surround your old Capitol with what we just did in Chicago. And we actually hired Henry Van Brunt to start a competition, and it resulted in the next 25 years with the 4 buildings that surround the old Capitol. In 1929, our Daily Iowan, still one of the very best student newspapers in the entire country, in 1929 did a naming contest for what we'd call those grounds rather than the former state capitol grounds. And it was a dentistry student from Independence, Iowa, who coined the phrase, the Pentacrest, 5 things on a hill. And that stuck. That's been the name ever since. So our first iteration of the University of Iowa was, in fact, an echo of the 1893 World's Fair. And we still consider that Great White City presence, that city beautiful movement that occurred on the Pentacrest, as our home base. And then from there in the 20s, sort of a brick base to that. You can't build in limestone forever. It's very costly. But we went to buildings like the chemistry building, the communication center, the library, to a brick base below that Pentacrest. And then ultimately in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and today, the expression of creative architecture, the sort of the jewels that are representing our arts and are around the river, now protected more than ever.
Right. The Pentacrest, are you redoing that, or you got some modernization?
Well, yeah, within our 10-year plan, we certainly have the Pentacrest as a thrust of our importance and our priority. The buildings are now at, or some of them well over 100 years of age. It is absolutely the symbolic core and heart of our campus and our academic campus. And we are, as we must be, fully committed to the buildings of the Pentacrest, but they continue to age. Only one of the 4 buildings, Schaefer Hall, has been modernized, where we opened it up, gutted it, and modernized the interior in 1999, still in great shape. The other 3 need work, and we intend to maximize our academic endeavors there, to bring the students of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences and others to the Pentacrest, but to modernize the buildings in their place, protecting their architecture, but also protecting their fate in the future. That is certainly part of our 10-year plan, and in fact relies on a partnership with our state. We're proposing with the state that we work in concert with the Board of Regents for if you will, a deferred maintenance buy-down allowance program through the state, where they will partner with us to provide funds. We'll partner funds back, and we'll dedicate those funds to modernizing aging buildings that we must and need to protect for the future.
Another gem, if you're in Iowa City, you've got to see the old Capitol.
Yeah.
There's tours daily, aren't they?
Yeah, the building is open all but on Mondays, and it is its own museum. We have, of course, the Stanley Museum of Art, but then we have the Pentacrest Museums. Liz Crooks and her team host the museums in McBride Hall, which has Iowa Hall, Bird and Mammal Hall, but then also the great museum. You know, we nearly lost... We're great at disasters at the University of Iowa. We nearly lost the old Capitol in 2001,
fire,
and because of a fire. Yeah. We were able to survive that as well. And after 5 years, in 2006, it was reopened as a museum, and we actually added the basement level to that museum setting. It's got a great history of the state of Iowa. The Senate and House chambers are designed at different periods of the building, one from 1842, the other from the 1920s, when there was another major renovation to the building. And so it's a great picture of the history of our state and of our university, and we have events there all the time, but it's open to the public for people to come and visit.
I love the quill and pans. They're on top of the desk, the way it was. With the
spittoons.
Yeah. You don't have those anymore, I don't think.
No.
So let's keep going, and let's talk about the new wrestling facility.
Sure, absolutely.
That's an exciting thing.
It is exciting. As I mentioned, it's going to be a last addition on Carver Hawkeye Arena. We don't have any more room on the site. That's primarily why. But everyone knows the storied history of our wrestling program, and now another chapter in that we are the first Power 5 conference to start our women's wrestling team with Coach Clarissa Chun. They'll start competition this year. The new building will host both the men's and the women's programs. It'll be a training center that advances not just our student athletes, but those that are looking to be Olympic champions and world champions. And we have a storied history in that as well. So as great as our programs have been under Dan Gable and the history of the wrestlers here, we've had undersized and outdated facilities relying on 1983 wrestling facilities since we've been going. And this project, thanks to donations and the generosity of donors, it's a completely funded project by donors, will be the Goschke family wrestling facility. We'll be finishing the project in, right now the schedule is for April next year. We'll push to do it earlier than that, but the project is going very well. McComas Lacina locally is constructing the project, and we're really excited as a top program and one that will advance the reputation of the university.
Can we have a picture of that, Austin? I mean, maybe go back to. Have you got, there it is.
Yeah, there you see it in the foreground to Carver Hawkeye Arena and that distinctive roof structure at Carver. Another example why Carver was green before green. Typically buildings heat those parts of the structure, and we took it outside and it became the iconic element. But you can see how the new wrestling center fits into the south portion of that yard. It will include and keep the artwork that was originally there. Stone Rising, which was this play on the idea of the ancient ruins of the Colosseum next to the modern arena or Coliseum. We worked with the artist out of California to retain that piece. It will work as a foreground for the building itself. And you think about the ancient notion of wrestling, the first Olympic sport. It really fits it well thematically. So we're on several levels. We're so excited about the project and what it will do for the program and for the community. It's great. And as we were mentioning beforehand, I have this sort of selfish reason that I like it. There are certain things I don't get paid to do, and it's nice that I don't get paid because then I can see you get what you pay for. But I do have the honor of being the voice of the Iowa Hawkeyes at Carver Hawkeye Arena on the microphone, and I have the best seat in town.
Right.
And now I and everyone else will see them run out of their own tunnel. Out of that side of the arena.
So they train in there and they lift and wrestle in there. That's what they do.
Absolutely. That's where they'll do their training, and then they'll continue to compete on the floor of Carver Hawkeye Arena, where we will, within the next couple of weeks, announce the wrestling schedule and sell it out an hour later. So get your order forms ready. When they announce the schedule, the seats go fast.
When's Iowa Penn State, or is that?
They don't know yet. It's going to be. We know it's going to be here.
It's going to be here.
It's going to be rocking, and it will certainly be on the Big Ten Network. But the Big Ten Network will work out all of the basketball and wrestling. As you've seen in recent years, they've really featured wrestling a lot, which has been fantastic. But they need to coordinate that with the schedules in basketball as well. So they work both wrestling and basketball together in the schedules. But they're going to be coming out here in the next couple of weeks, we hope.
If you've never seen Iowa wrestling, I highly recommend Iowa Penn State.
Yeah, if you can get a ticket, I recommend it too. It'll be something else because Penn State's been the team to beat, and we intend to beat them.
Good. Can we go to that University Hospital in Forever Green? We talked about that briefly. There you go. There you go. That's beautiful.
Yeah, quick shot. And if you drive by, you're starting to see that appearance. The concrete exterior panels are going up, and we're going to be enclosing that building, before long. So exciting progress on the project so far.
What else do we have we could talk about? We got some other. Is this?
Yeah, it's really kind of a cover picture of the fateful Iowa River and how we committed to live with it and take advantage of what is a unique and special place. But we recognize its threat. You can see on the left-hand side the Iowa Memorial Union, which was built originally in 1925, added to over the years. But you can see how it responds to the river. And in fact, that curved wall you see is the flood protection method used in coordination with FEMA. Not only did we have to repair the building, which had 6-7 feet of water deep on the student floor on the ground level. But we have to, in contract with FEMA, also protect the building from flooding. And in this case, it was a temporary, or rather a permanent solution. Some are temporary. This one's permanent, where we built a flood wall, the curvilinear wall you can see along the edge of the river. There's a little amphitheater next to that. And then what happens because of the height of it, there's a new plaza on top of that, a new place for students to gather looking over the river, right outside the river room eating facility. So we're just about to start a project thanks to a partnership with our students. And we will be modernizing the Iowa Memorial Union, a major project. We're in design right now. And part of that will be activating that porch, that plaza, activating Hubbard Park, and making it a place where the student community really feels at home to go there. And it will also host our student wellness and mental health facilities, which have become more and more important over time. The stresses that were created by COVID, and even before that, for the students that are here, we need to make sure that, and it is in our strategic plan for the University of Iowa, the well-being of each person on our campus is more important than ever. So we will be, if you will, getting out of the business of the Iowa Hotel.
House, yeah.
And the Iowa House will close down. This is its last year. But those floors will be used for higher and better needs for University of Iowa students.
And speaking of mental health, that's, I don't know if you can talk about the Mercy acquisition, but that's the thought behind that is mental health.
Well, it's certainly something that is in progress. And people know locally that Mercy has declared bankruptcy. It's in the hands of the courts right now. The University of Iowa has offered to purchase it. It doesn't mean that others can't. We await the news from the courts and if there are other pursuers of it. But certainly in the context of serving the public good and our community and the health care needs of our community, it's important that that facility continue to remain a hospital, continue to serve the citizens of our community. As we've already mentioned, our hospital is at near 100% capacity, near 100% of the time. And not having a hospital facility in the midst of Iowa City would further impact that. It would be too early for us to prognosticate or to work through what a building we don't own would best serve and how it would best serve us. We and our objectives for public health in the community and in the state, but it is something that is certainly on our minds and an interesting moment in Iowa City history with healthcare.
Anything else along the river that you're up to?
Yeah, along the river. Not specifically, except that we continue to activate the river. We continue to do things that the rec services, as you might recall, the canoe house, lagoon shelter, which was built way back in 1939. It's a building that's flooded, but it doesn't care if it floods. It's a stone building that sits kind of a cute building just south of Hansher. And rec services is looking at reactivating that and making recreation programs out of it to, again, accent the importance of the river. When I was a student here, we had canoe classes out of that building. It was called the Canoe House when I was here. It was originally the Lagoon Shelter, but they will continue to, and we will continue to look at ways to accent the river and make it a special place. You can see in that photograph, the rowing team, our crew team. We have a great nationally ranked crew team. And it's sort of a picturesque, neat way to see folks going across the river. Of course, one of the things that we're looking forward to, you can see in that photograph, the 1936 IMU Bridge. The week of homecoming, which is coming up, that's the week ahead of the Purdue game, October, I think it's 9th. That week, and also finals week in the spring, we fly the flags of every nation, of every student attending the University of Iowa over the IMU Bridge that week. And just as we said with the museum earlier, I would urge anyone listening to take some time homecoming week and walk across that bridge. It is moving. It is beautiful to see more than 100 flags from 100 nations, all representing the students. And we've had moving stories of students where one flag represents one student.
Wow.
And the president receiving a note with the picture and that person saying, I've never felt more welcomed in my entire life, being so far from my family and from my country, to be on that bridge and see you recognize me and my country. Very moving tributes to it. And it's a striking, beautiful photograph. So anybody who wants to see it, it'll be homecoming week. Student Life coordinates that effort. And we're very proud of that new tradition on our campus as well.
Great. Got another slide, Austin. What's this building now?
That's the Health Science Academic Building. This is the one that will go across the street from the field house, and next to the Jardine Athletic Learning Center, next to just south of Slater Hall, Residence Hall on the west side. This is the one that will host our Communications and Disorder Sciences, CSD, the Physical Therapy program in the Carver College of Medicine, and then our Health and Human Physiology. Health and Human Physiology is the largest College of Liberal Arts and Sciences program at the campus and the fastest growing. It is popular. It is in demand professionally. It includes, for instance, and now a really strong sports management program. We're going to take these three programs that are they're all in outdated buildings currently, and they're going to go into this together where they will have overlaps in programs and in coordination. It'll make these three nationally ranked programs even stronger. And yes, get ready or make the space, the site available for that hospital tower.
Good. Great. Is that triangular shaped there?
It isn't. It's an L-shaped building. It's the architect's way of doing perspective that makes it look more expressive, probably in that image than it would be otherwise. It is a L-shaped facility. What you're looking at is looking south and west in the courtyard that would be between this building and Slater Hall.
That's nice.
So it also gives some green space for the residents on that side of campus. And there, just a shot of the
Tower.
University of Iowa hospitals and clinics. You can see the Stead Family Children's Hospital, and then the hospital front. We're roughly at this point that we're standing in this photograph, we're roughly on the footprint of the new patient tower that will start construction in 2025.
Great. What an amazing place.
Yeah, real, as we say, changing lives, but quite a life-saving, life-changing place.
It's amazing that it's 100% full at all times. It's amazing to me.
Yeah.
I mean, all the specialties, people don't appreciate the healthcare, but everybody comes to Iowa, it seems like.
Yeah, we have a new vice president for medical affairs, Denise Jameson. Dr. Jameson is remarkable. She's just started and is doing wonderful things already and taking on these projects and the operations of not only what is happening at the hospital, but as dean of our Carver College of Medicine. So a big plate.
Great. Well, Rod, this has been fantastic. I appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
Telling us a little bit more about what's going on at the University of Iowa. So
yeah, it's my pleasure. It's a great place to work and an exciting place to be, especially in the fall.
thanks a lot, Rod.
You bet, Gary.